Hello and welcome. For those of you that don't know, I am Teresa, a yoga teacher and acupuncturist with a keen interest in learning more or sharing more about principles of traditional Chinese medicine, specifically in this module, the applied principles of yin and yang to yoga, right? There are a lot of overlaps between what we see and know of in Ayurvedic principles, which are more aligned to the practice of yoga. However, we see styles like yin yoga, lots of blended multidisciplinary approaches. And I think it's a really lovely overlay and informative topic to further explore. One of my most favorite quotes regarding yin and yang is, if you can understand yin and yang, you can hold the universe in your hands. Chinese medicine, when you learn, can feel very overwhelming. At times, it can feel like your brain is trying to solve algorithms and who knows what else. But at the very core, the fundamental principles always come back to this concept of yin and yang. So I'm sure you know the sign, the circular movement divided almost like two fish, black in white, white in black, all right? And what's important, what do we see here? A circle has no beginning and no end. We see the reflection of lightness in dark and darkness in light. So we're looking at something, we'll talk about the four principles, but in opposition, interdependent, interrelated, and mutual consumption. So just planting seeds, all right? So when in doubt, coming back to understanding yin and yang allows us to hold the universe in our hands. Everything about our environment can be categorized under a yin and yang context, okay? Traditional Chinese medicine, often referred to as TCM. You will also come across things like East Asian medicine. For example, the college in Athens that I studied at called themselves East Asian because, yes, of course, it is traditional Chinese medicine. But in Japan, they also use acupuncture. In places like Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea, they all practice different forms of acupuncture, different approaches and engagements with the elemental construct or the diagnostic approach, but similar foundations. Also, philosophy of yin and yang, etc. Okay, so for us today, we're talking about traditional Chinese medicine, which originated in ancient China more than 2,500 years ago. Just like yoga, Ayurvedic practices, they've been around for a long, long time, right? The style that a traditional Chinese doctor will practice includes possible herbal medicine. If you are South African based and you know the company China Herb, they're becoming more and more prevalent. They're pre-packaged herbal formulas from thousands of years ago. All right, so very good product if you ever come across it. Okay, acupuncture. So acupuncture, if you've been on my Instagram page, you will know that the needles are of a similar thickness to a strand of hair, if not a little bit less. Okay, so just up close so you can see there's the little handle and then the needle itself. All right, so the needles come in different lengths, in different thicknesses for different parts of the body. For example, if you are needling a gallbladder point on the glute, you're going to need a longer needle because there's more muscle to go through. If we're doing delicate cosmetic acupuncture, for example, is becoming very, very popular. They use the tiniest little intradermal needles into the face, into the point allocation, right? They will include cupping, okay? This is glass cupping, so you will use it with fire and you place it on and it creates a suction, okay? Gwyneth Paltrow, lots of the American Olympic swimming team, a lot of athletes really, really like the cupping for myofascial release. There are lots of research papers on it. So if you do enjoy a ResearchGate rabbit hole, you'll certainly find a lot to back up the efficacy and intention of cupping. Massage, Chinese massage is called tunya, all right? You don't necessarily use a lot of oil. It's a lot of finger pressure, a lot of different manipulation into the skin, and you might even remain clothed. You might have heard of shiatsu, which is a similar approach, but the Japanese style. Shiatsu means thumb pressure. Okay, so that would be the equivalent of a massage in Japanese traditional medicine. Okay. Exercise, things like Tai Chi, Qigong, and dietary therapy. Okay, so already just looking at this, we understand how much of a holistic approach they're working with, okay, because they are able to draw from toolkits or different specializations. And it doesn't mean that if you're a Tunya practice, you don't necessarily practice acupuncture, or maybe as an acupuncturist, you would refer to Tunya for the massage. Okay. But in your training, you learn most of these. The herbal medicine is much more specialized. Excuse me. Important to know that acupuncture does work, okay, does have efficacy, obviously, but to be honest, if you perhaps choose a point that maybe isn't the best point, there's very little harm that you can cause, right? Whereas in the herbal medicine, you need to be a lot more specific with your diagnosis, okay? Right. So, as I said, the fine needles for acupuncture are needled directly into the skin. So, when we look at qualifications, certifications, all of this has to do with the fact that the needle punctures the skin, right? The moment we puncture the skin, it becomes a different level of medicinal authority, if you want to say, as opposed to a tunya or a cupping that doesn't puncture through the skin. All right. The cups, as I said, these ones are heated. So you'll hold a pair of tweezers with a flame, you'll place it underneath, and then very quickly putting it onto the skin. Depending if you're working with deficiency or excess, there are different approaches, short little cups, sliding onto the skin, or the more popular one, just leaving it on the skin and feeling it lift away, right? The herbs can come in a tea form, in a powder form. These are generally herbs that are mixed for the individual, right? Or capsules like the China herb, the pre-mixed recipe or formula is what they tend to call it, okay? They also use moxibustion, which is mugwort. Rolled up, it can look like a cigar, or possibly even a joint, to be frank, okay? And you also get the smokeless kind, which I'm going to show you. So this is more like a charcoal, okay? The moxa is incredibly good for inflammation. It's incredibly good for yang deficiencies when we want to draw heat into the body. These little ones are used to hover specifically over the point, or even for the face, the more delicate areas of the body, and less overpowering. The odor of moxibustion can be quite strong for a lot of people, okay? Then, of course, when it comes to exercise, we look at Tai Chi, right? In the same way that yoga has Ashtanga, Iyengar, Vinyasa, Yin, different types under that umbrella, you do find northern styles Tai Chi, southern styles Tai Chi, different forms that they would do in different areas, okay? Slow movements, focusing on the breath, right? So stimulating life force, Chi. Chi, one and the same thing to prana. So we recognize the language, prana, nadi lines, Ayurvedic, yoga, pranayam. We look at the same. We look at chi, energy pathways or meridian channels, acupressure points, acupuncture points, Tai Chi, and then Qigong is the breath practice. Okay. And there's a lot, Tai Chi and Qigong, well, especially Qigong. Maybe it's just my biased Instagram algorithm, but there is a lot more out there. It's become a lot more popularized. For a while, it's sort of dipped down, and I think yoga peaked a little bit. And now I think there's just this normal ebb and flow in terms of what people are looking for and different aspects to explore. But there are some lovely Tai Chi movements, lovely Qigong practices that really blend well in a yoga practice. And they have lovely little names like wiping the table, cloud hands, sparrow tail, very, very endearing, and similar to yoga, reflective of the environment. Overarching principal philosophy of Chinese medicine or any East Asian medicine is to find balance within the whole individual person, right? So we work with the mind, the body, the spirit, and the natural environment, okay? If the body is in a state of balance, homeostasis, there will be no dis-ease, okay? Language for me always tells more of a story than we realize, and we sometimes might even take for granted. But if we think of dis-ease, okay, what are we striving for? Comfort, health, strength, wellness, well-being, all right? As yogis, we already acknowledge that each individual is unique. So the way that I might treat a patient would be completely different to a colleague, right? Even if presenting with the same symptoms, right? One of my lecturers, she always used to say, Western medicine is really difficult to study. The volume, the science, the chemistry, the physiology, okay? But she said easier to practice. Chinese medicine, easier to learn for a lot of people. It's a little bit of a calling, but much, much harder to practice because in Western medicine, not to criticize, but they have an antibiotic for a symptom, or they have the DSM guide, for example, in psychiatry. There are these tools and very specific guidelines to follow through on a diagnosis. Chinese medicine is different. It's a lot about the creativity of the practitioner, in the same way we see as Vinyasa yoga teachers, okay? No two classes need to be alike. Even Ashtanga, where it's primary and secondary series, you might go to the class and two different teachers will have a completely different approach. Okay, that's more of the essence in terms of what we're talking about, in how different our approach to the individual and that rapport of the practitioner and the patient needs to be, okay, strong and wholesome and reciprocated, okay, flowing and energetic exchange that serves both. Western medicine seeks to understand things by breaking them down into separate parts, right? We're not criticizing, okay? I always tell people that allopathic medicine is rooted in Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine. Everything falls flat at some point, even us as our human selves, okay? There were just some things that these kinds of practices couldn't fix. And therefore, we must not negate or diminish the role of Western medicine, but understand the differences. And at some stage, we may need to lean into the science of Western medicine and then revert back to the philosophies of the more alternative practices. Okay. TCM considers the universe and each human holistically. I think we'll all agree that as humans, we exist as part of an energy-filled universe, okay? Within the universe, our mind and body are different manifestations of the same life force, right? My skin is a kind of prana, if you know the different directions of prana, okay? It's moving in different ways. A leaf is prana. What I'm sitting on is prana, okay? The same thing of chi, right? If you study philosophy, they will ask you, is a table really a table, right? So we're really looking at energy, okay? Yin and yang, energy, continuation of that, enhancement of that, and preservation of that, okay? In the same way that yoga asanas developed, the ancient Chinese observed the environment, okay, and to understand their role within the universe and how that reflects within them, okay. Just like Ayurvedic, the 5 elements, your different doshas, okay, how you interact with your environment given your personal constitution is a very similar comparison here, okay. The fundamental principle of Hatha is to bring balance to the mind, body, and spirit. I often use the analogy that, if you have an iPhone, so I have an iPhone, my husband has a Samsung. If he says to me, how do I do this on my phone? I can't help him navigate because they're both phones, they're both serving the same function, but the nuances and the familiarity, or like the brain coding of the one compared to the other, feels like a much more stark contrast. I find people who started with yoga, with Ayurveda, sometimes the reflection into the Chinese medicine can be a little bit challenging, and vice versa. People that I studied with, learning the 5 element protocols of Chinese medicine, and then me asking or introducing questions in comparison to Ayurvedic thoughts, not always easy, right? So just remember those 4 stages of learning. We are unconsciously incompetent, then we are consciously incompetent. That's the really sticky, uncomfortable space where we realize what we don't know, right? We have to go through that to become consciously competent, and then eventually unconsciously competent. So if you are a yoga teacher, maybe you can still remember the first yoga class that you taught. It's overwhelming. You're thinking music, your sequence, maybe some surprise person with an injury or lower back problem or pregnancy arrived, and you had to really think on your feet and adapt. If you've been teaching for a long time, those things no longer become curveballs, okay? They just become something that you can go with and not even feel necessarily challenged by, okay? Hatha translated from Sanskrit, Ha meaning sun, Tha meaning moon, okay? Willful and forceful. The practice of Nadi Shodhan, as we recognize it, right? So our alternate nostril breath works with that Sushumna main Nadi line that follows the central nervous system, okay? In Chinese medicine, we talk of the Ren and the Du, the conception and the governing vessel, right? So we want to balance Ida, the moon, and Pingala, the sun. Or if we want to take it to Western medicine speak, Ida being parasympathetic nervous system. Remember, you jump out of the plane, parachute, parasympathetic nervous system, and Pingala being sympathetic, right? That's our fight or flight response, fight, flight, or freeze. So when you get onto that airplane or helicopter, your adrenaline's pumping, okay? The stress hormone cortisol is questioning what you're doing, your heart rate's going up, maybe you're getting sweaty palms, all right? Pupils are dilating, and then you leap out of the plane, your parachute opens, and your body knows, okay, I can rest, digest, relax, okay? Ida and Pingala are opposite aspects of the one prana or Shakti, all right? The positive symbolism of Pingala refers to the physical level of activation, and the negative symbolism of Ida refers to the mental level, right? When we look at yin and yang, we are working with the same principles, okay? We are working with an idea of opposites, all right? Positive and negative, light and dark, morning and night, okay? Summer and winter. There is gender language in this, masculine and feminine, all right? But I think the takeaway that we can have from this is that they are intertransformational, all right? But it acknowledges the opposites within that, okay? And it will always depend on the comparison of the context, okay? In Chinese language, they have no present tense, no past tense, no masculine, no feminine, no plural, no singular. It's all absorbed and communicated in the context of the conversation. So if I am speaking to you, if you're male or female, then we would know, okay? It wouldn't be lost in that. If we are talking and we're looking and there are 5 cars, we know that the word for car is adapted as a plural. But when you're learning the language, you learn the characters, and it's not like in English where we have past participles and nominative and accusative and such things. It's really the essence of the dialogue in the context at that time, right? And yin and yang are similar. When we make the comparisons, it's in the context of the conversation, all right? Okay. A little bit of what I mentioned earlier. Okay, they're representing opposite but complementary qualities. Okay, just like the symbol depicts, yin contains the scene of yang, so that yin can transform into yang and vice versa. All right. So as I said a few slides back, these four basic principles of yin and yang are really fundamental to understanding maybe the more exciting stuff, like when I move on to concepts like Jin Qi Shen, or when we look at the pathways, the channels themselves. It's really important to have a strong grasp of these foundations, okay? The four principles being interdependent, one cannot exist without the other. Both create a totality, a complete whole, right? A daily cycle is only complete with the night, right? We can't have summer without going through spring, okay? We can't get to winter without going through to autumn. But global warming aside, we will always transition from one season to the other in repetition, okay? There will always be a pattern of transformation, okay? The seed of one creating and moving and transforming into the other, okay? Intertransformational, under certain conditions, yin can transform into yang, right? So when in harmony, the two energies blend into a seamless whole, all right? And as perfectly represented in the yin yang symbol, summer to winter, day into night, okay? So we also for women's health is really interesting because our menstrual cycle follows the symbol of the yin and yang, right? So after our period, okay, we needed yang energy. Let me start from the beginning. Once the menstruation is finished, we need to nourish blood. We need to nourish yin. The yin builds and builds and builds to create the eggs, all right? But when we get to ovulation, the yin needs to transform to yang. So the yin peaks at such a point that its only way to go is back to yang. And then the yang energy needs to build so that we have that effort to, if there isn't a pregnancy, release the eggs. Okay, so moving through the luteal and follicular phases is another example of this intertransformation, okay, within our monthly cycles, right? Opposition. For every condition, there exists an opposite, all right? Everything contains the seed of its opposite and are dynamic and constantly changing. Water, when frozen, becomes ice, but ice can then melt, return to water, all right? Water can boil and create steam, but then condense, okay? And you get those little droplets of water coming back down, right? Mutual consumption. So this is maybe the one diagnostically that's a little bit tricky to wrap your head around, okay? If one increases, the other is consumed in an attempt to preserve balance, okay? One part gains and the other part loses. Hopefully you can still remember as a child, or maybe you have children, or you were recently on a seesaw, and you used to, I remember as a little kid, you had that person that was just perfect, okay, that you could have this really gentle rocking up and down experience with. And then you got the little bit more assertive or enthusiastic person to come onto the seesaw with you. And you used to really hit that tire below with a lot of force. And then it would just, on the opposite side, almost like ricochet you up and then down and then up and then down, okay? Mutual consumption is trying to create the balance, but the more force that's applied or the less amount of force is going to determine how the scale or the seesaw is tipping, okay? Important, some qualities of yin and yang. So like I've been saying, they can be used to describe all phenomenon, day into night, summer into autumn, young into old, okay? Yin is receptive and yang is expressive, right? The basic principle is that yin is passive and yang is active, right? So coming back to Ida and Pingala, Ida being the left side, the moon, the feminine, the calming, parasympathetic nervous system. Pingala being the more dynamic, the more activating, the more sympathetic nervous system, and more energizing, okay? Also, what do we know from pranayama? We have hyperventilating, okay? Breath techniques that elevate the heart rate, that, you know, your kundalini, listen to me, Kapalabhati, Bastrikas, okay, much more forceful. They're creating a heat in the body. They're more yang by nature. And then we have the hypoventilating practices, okay? One's belly breathing, like we do in Shavasana. We want to slow things down. We want to cool into the body. Okay, we want to engage with that rest and digest space. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, just to take a few moments, all right? So you can pause the recording here and list some examples of what you might think are yang qualities. List some examples of yin qualities, all right? What do you think are typically yang yoga asanas or poses and why? What do you think yin yoga asanas look like and why? And how does a traditional hatha sequence maintain balance in both Ida and Pingala and or yin and yang principles? All right. So please hit pause, give it some thought. I'm going to talk you through it afterwards. There's very little that can go wrong. It's lovely to do live and to make it discursive, but just as good, it's important for you to think about things, to dust out the cobwebs, to also recognize what is familiar. So hitting pause, and then you can come back to me in a moment. All right, welcome back. So I am curious to know what your yang and yin qualities were. I'm sure you're spot on with many of them. Yang, active, all right? So we're going to look at hot. We're going to look at anything moving upwards, okay? We're going to look at things being faster, things that create heat, much more dynamic, all right? Yin qualities are cooling, calming, passive, slowing down, right? So if we think of Pitta in the dosha categories, yang, okay? Fire, yang. If we look at Kapha, right? Earth, heavy, close to the ground, yin, right? If we look at tamas and rajasic, okay, rajasic would be more yang, tamas would be more yin. And what's sattvic? Yin and yang in balance, okay? More typically yang yoga asanas, all right? We're looking at, we can even put this according to their styles. Vinyasa, what are we doing? Up, down, up, down. We're creating heat, big arm movements. We're trying to reach to the sky, okay? Even if we're in an inversion, the feet are elevated, okay? We're creating heat. We need a lot of strength, okay? We're activating into the muscle fibers. We're working into those joint capsules, okay? So certainly Iyengar, Ashtanga, Vinyasa, hot flows, okay? Yang on yang. Anything where we're, like a friend of mine always calls it back sweat, okay? Any movements where that's what we're encouraging, all right? More typically yin yoga asanas, of course, we have yin yoga, right? And restorative. What's the essence of that practice? Low to the ground, okay? Low to earth. Slow. We move from pose to pose really slowly. We're encouraging heaviness in the body, right? Okay. So we're looking at movements that still have a strong energetic effect, but we're keeping the body, the internal system cool. We're not elevating the heart rate. We're not, it's unlikely that we're even breaking a sweat unless there's a strong detoxification happening. So never say never, but on the, generally it's safe to say, all right? And cocooning, right? In a comparison of yoga pose blocks, back bending can be more yang, right? Remember, it's extroverted, it's opening, it's how we interact with our external environment. And yin, the forward folding, all right? More internalized, more introverted, more yin by essence. Okay. And also, if you think in yin yoga, we negate the Surya Namaskar. We don't have sun salutations, all right? For me, I learned to teach vinyasa before I learned to teach hatha, and I can't tell you how much in the process I wished I'd learned it the other way around. So the essence of the Hatha yoga sequence, if you don't know it, obviously you do your warm-up, your Pawanamuktasan, and then we have back bending, forward folding, twisting, standing inversions and or arm balances, and then Shavasana. Okay. Ida and Pingala we've spoken about, all right? We've recognized Ida as a yin representation, Pingala as a yang representation, moving energy along that Sushumna Nadi line to balance parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Okay. In a Hatha class, we see little sprinkles of yang moving to yin. So like I just said earlier, we have the yang of the back bends, followed by the yin of the forward folds. Okay, we twist to both sides, right and left. So twisting, activating yin and yang sides of the body, right? And then we come into standing, all right, depending how you sequence, inversions, arm balances, more yang in nature, but then Shavasana is yin. Okay, close to the floor, slowing down, cooling systems kick in, okay, because we always suggest layering up or put a blanket or, make sure the body is warm enough. Okay, so already I always think it helps to find tangible examples or examples within environments that are familiar to you so that you can draw these contrasts and comparisons. And if you are a yoga teacher, when you're sequencing, you can think, is this more a yang dominant practice? Where do I bring yin in? Even in yin yoga, for example, we have counter poses, okay? Gentle little pulsating movements. Some people even call it rebounding. That's our sprinkle of yang in a yin practice. Okay, so again, acknowledging that they are never completely in isolation, right? We're always including, right? So just a little table, all right, for you to have a look-see of some other qualities of yin that you might have written down or might not have thought of. Okay, passive, earth, substance. Like when we talk about substance, it's like things that are heavy, okay? It has substance, like the soil has substance, it's tangible, okay? We can look at it, we can feel it, right? Inside, so internal, feminine, dark, space, contraction, okay, coming inwards. Blood, body fluids, and tissues are more yin in nature. The front of the body, or the front of the head, is more yin than the back of the body. The soft parts of the body, okay, that little squishy, also, I hope it's far away, but it's probably not, menopausal pouch or a little bit of extra tummy, okay? It's softer parts in the body. Material, it produces form. Again, that's tangible. It's what we can see. It grows, right? Things grow from the soil. Women, childbirth, pregnancy, it's the yin capacity to build, right? Just like I said, in the menstrual cycle, the first 2 weeks are yin in nature. We are building and nourishing the blood and the body fluids and the tissues to create healthy eggs that are then released by the yang energy, okay? Substantial, again, like substance, matter, contraction again, sorry, that's a double up, descending, okay, coming downwards, right? Yin energy moves down, yang energy moves up, okay? Just think yin is more grounding, right? Below, water is considered more yin. West and north are yin directions. Okay, this comes from cosmological cycle. It's not necessary to worry about, just to know. Water is yin, but remember it's transformational, right? So we could see different tides in the ocean as different examples of when there is more yin and when there is more yang. Okay, so again, like the language, there's always the context and the comparison. Qualities of yang: active, dynamic, heaven, okay, going upwards. Function, it's outside, it's external, okay, like what I was saying with back bending and forward folding, has a lot to do with our mind. All the yang channels come up to the head, okay. Masculine, light, when we talk about time, okay, things move, okay, it's more dynamic, okay. Expansion, okay, yoga arms, okay, different warrior arms, expanding. It's the energy of the body, the back side of the body, okay? it's immaterial, so less form, okay? So when you're boiling the kettle, the steam is yang, the water is yin, right? Produces energy, it generates also, okay? If you think of your flow sequence, it's generative, okay? You're moving, you're layering, you're creating a sequence. Non-substantial, okay? Energetic, all right? Rising, it's above fire, okay? Like I said, Peter, east and south, and the hard parts, okay? The hard parts of the body, and the soft parts are the yin, remembering that, okay? In terms of the back of the body, so if you think of when it's cold, all right, what feels now that we're going into winter, there's nothing better than turning your back to face the sun and warming up, right? And the hard parts are sheltering the softer parts, the more delicate organs that need protecting in the body of the yin, right? So that's just something to help maybe frame or remember: yang, back of the body; yin, front of the body. Okay. 6 divisions of yin and yang. We have cold, interior, deficient, heat, exterior, and excess. Okay. These become little building blocks, or like your flour and water when you're baking, or your diagnostic approach, and also your further learning as you learn the channels and the pathways and the points, right? Obviously, here we can see the opposition: cold and hot, interior, exterior, deficient, and excess, right? So lining up cold, interior, deficient makes sense that those would be more yin in nature. Heat, exterior, excess, more yang in nature. And then by comparison, cold being the yin to the yang of heat, interior being the yin to the yang of the exterior, and deficiency being the yin to the excess, to the yang of excess. Okay, so what this means is when we're doing a diagnosis and we're holding the universe in our hands, we are contemplating: is this a cold pattern? Is this a hot pattern? Is this an interior pattern or exterior? So interior meaning more chronic, exterior more acute when it's still on the superficial layers. Is it a deficiency? Okay, or is it an excess? Okay, and even in diagnosis, you get a lot of overlaps in the one becoming the other, because we know all those 4 principles, right? That's interrelated, opposition, mutual consumption, and intertransformational, right? But important building blocks to be comfortable with. Okay. There are 4 primary patterns of yin and yang, okay? Stay with me. Sometimes you get this super quickly. Other times it just needs to be mulled over a little bit more. Okay. So apart from just hot and cold, or yin and yang, we have these primary patterns that we need to be discerning about. So also a patient intake, or for ourselves, we want to understand: is this excess yin, excess yang, deficient yin, or deficient yang? Okay. So they can result from a variety of internal and external factors: diet, lifestyle, emotional stresses, constitution also, okay? Just like your doshas, they have elemental constitutions in Chinese medicine. I would say the first 2 are pretty straightforward. So if something is excess yin, all right, we call it full cold, right? So if there's too much cold, the yang is consumed, right? So the body gets cold and it starts to burn the heat in the body to try to stay warm, but it has a capacity, okay? So there's so much external cold that it consumes the yang, okay? You know, when you're shivering that you're so cold, that's the yang trying to help move things and help to warm the body, but it can't overcome the excess yin and the full cold, right? So when it's full cold, winter, okay, going outside or being unprepared, windy day, you want to bundle up to try to layer up, okay, to add more yang to try to dissipate the yin in its excess cold form, okay? And the body will feel cold to the touch, okay? Excess yang, the opposite, right? So the yang is in excess, yin is consumed, the body is hot, therefore cold gets consumed, right? So a lot of people also, when you get very, very bad heat stroke, will be at risk of having their body temperature drop quite drastically. Okay, so that's the yin being consumed, but trying to fight back to balance that. Okay, we call this full heat, and excess yang consumes yin. If you think of our skin, okay, we don't want dry skin, we want moist, supple skin. What happens when we get sunburned? Okay, that's excess yang, a lot of heat, it dries it out. Okay, and if it's a really bad burn, we peel. Right, so the excess yang has consumed the yin, the fluid in the skin, in the body, and left it, and it's a process of you have to apply more moisturizer or exfoliate or wait it out for the yin yang to balance out again. All right. Deficient yin and deficient yang are a little bit complex. They don't have to be. They just, if you need to rewatch this part of the recording or come back to it or read up a little bit more, go for it, because it does take a little while to sink in, right? If yin is deficient, the body has insufficient cold, right? So we're not looking at an external factor here, we're looking at an internal factor, okay? So internally, there's not enough cold, so therefore it feels hot, right? Imagine you're used to a building that's air-conned. I hate air-con, but say you're in Zanzibar or somewhere, Thailand, hot and humid, and you're in a building and the aircon stops working, okay? What's going to happen? You're going to start to feel hot, okay? This is happening within your internal aircon, okay? It's not generating enough cool for whatever reason, and therefore the relativity creates a sensation of hot, okay? So we call it empty heat. And the classic example that they love to give of this is for menopause, right? So there's a deficiency of certain hormones which result in hot flushes. Yin being that feminine energy, so we can recognize when that starts to deplete, there's not enough cooling for the body and hot flushes happen, okay? So pink cheeks, yang energy builds upwards, and if you know of women who are menopausal, it can be on a very cold day that they're, when you're teaching a yin class and they're still taking clothes off and everybody else is almost like rushing for a blankie at the end of the practice, okay? The yin is weak, which makes it seem that the yang is in excess, okay? The yin is weak, so the yang is in apparent excess, right? This talks a lot to kidneys, which are related to our longevity, how we age, our hormones, our general immunity, constitution. So these kinds of depletions, deficiencies can be age-related. They can also be dietary or lifestyle-related or emotional, okay? So, if you're in that negative relationship, whatever it might be, and it just keeps sapping you, keeps depleting, okay? It creates a deficiency, and then there's a weakness of the yin, and the yang has moved, is able, like that seesaw, okay? It's able to just boing, rebound and appear to be in excess, okay? Deficient yang would be empty cold, right? So the yang is deficient in the body. It simply just doesn't have enough fire, enough heat to warm the body, and therefore you feel cold. This we see a lot in lower back pain. A lot of people who age have cold hands and cold feet, like the extremities get cold. I don't know if you've ever had that cold sensation to the back of your knees or just achy in the joints, okay? The yang is depleted for whatever reason, and it can't stimulate the circulation. So the extremities start to feel cold, all right? It's got nothing to do with the environment that you're in. It's nothing to do with those external inputs. It's your internal thermostat is not regulating, okay? So in this instance, it's winter inside the body. The heater is not working, all right? And therefore you just feel cold and you can't warm up, right? Sometimes when you have really bad cold and fever, when you get those shivering, okay, it's the yang is weak and the yin is in apparent excess, right? So excess yin and yang, full cold, full heat, has to do with external factors, input, climate, okay, as an example. deficient yin and yang, okay? Empty heat, empty cold, right? It's empty heat because it's actually got to do with the depletion of the yin, okay? It's empty cold because it has to do with the depletion and the deficiency of the yang, all right? And hopefully this little diagram helps. So if we look at excess yin, full cold, okay, this is the yin energy, okay, off the charts, and yang is stable, okay? If this is our optimal yang and yin balance, okay? Here, like we see them balanced out in equal proportions. When it's excess yang, full heat, so yin is at its level, it's where it needs to be, but the yang is in excess, okay? When we have empty heat, all right, so the yin is deficient, is less than the yang, and it shoots up. It makes the yang appear to be in excess, but we're feeding off these three. This is being the balanced, okay? And then we have empty heat, okay? We then have empty cold. When the yang drops down, it moves down, it depletes, it's deficient compared to its balanced variation, and it makes the yin appear to be in excess, okay? So balanced, optimal, okay, deficiency of yang, right, making the yin appear to be in excess. Over here, deficient yin, making the yin appear to be deficient, right? Making the yang appear to be in excess and the yin is deficient, okay? Full cold, full heat, empty cold, optimal, all right? Play around with that, try to see how the energies of yin and yang fluctuate in your body for yourself, okay? Try to notice how you feel as a result of different styles of yoga, different combinations, thinking of that balance, all right? Am I making my class excess yang, excess yin? Am I moving from the one to the other? How am I moving from the one to the other? Okay. And then when we talk about treatment strategies, we need to know that yin and yang are never static, right? Nothing is never frozen or solidified in one way. So we look at four options. We either want to tonify yang, all right? If the yang is deficient and we're sitting with that empty cold, we want to tonify yin if we're sitting with empty heat, all right? And we want the yin to buffer so that the yang doesn't seem like it's in excess. Or when it's full heat, we need to eliminate that excess yang. We need to expel heat from the body. If it's excess of yin, a full cold, we need to eliminate the cold, okay? We need to expel that pathogenic factor, okay, and move it out of the body, okay? So this is a very light introduction to the principles of yin and yang. As I said, it does allow you to hold the universe in your hands. All fundamental principles in our treatment strategies, in our diagnostic approach, come down to those interior, exterior, hot, cold, deficient, excess, okay? So those 6 levels, okay, are really important to just have in your mind, to understand, to feel comfortable with. So I really hope that the recording is useful. There is also a yin practice with the theme of yin and yang, and also a yoga nidra on the YouTube channel that I like to reinforce learning. So it's nice to apply it, so to speak, and then maybe some of the other suggestions or principles become easier to grasp. Thank you for your time.